In this video we'll be covering how we made Robert Baratheon's skull as part of our Game of Thrones Vivarium. To start off, we printed out the model of the skull and the crown at a 0.2mm height. This gave us all the detail that we needed, as we were going to be working on it once we'd finished printing. Next up is the tedious task of removing all of the excess support material that is needed when 3D printing. This extra structure is needed so that you don't end up printing into thin air. A lot of the big parts of the structure come away nice and easily, and the more you have your printer dialed in, the easier the removal will be. Different types of pliers can really help out when removing support material in different areas of the model. You need to be careful when breaking off supports near any of the finer details, as there's a high risk of breaking off parts of the model itself. You'll see this happen a few times in this video on the top parts of the crown. However, you always have the ability to glue them back onto the model once you've done with the removal of the rest of the support material. Quick tip, remember to check that your camera is in focus when you're trying to show something off to it. Now what you don't see in this video is the finishing process of the skull. After removing all of the support material, the model was sanded all over and filled with a hard modelling clay in areas that needed it. To see this process in more detail, check out the video covering the dragon skull. Here you can see the silicone that we're going to use to make the mould being mixed together. It's important to mix the two parts together as thoroughly as possible to make sure that you don't have any parts of your mould that don't cure. Make sure to scrape around the sides of whatever you're mixing it in to get all the excess silicone properly mixed as well. We then fixed the model into the bucket as shown here, ready for casting, using some more hard clay at the bottom, which ended up becoming our pouring hole when it came to casting the final piece. Now all we had to do was pour on the silicone and wait for it to harden. Once the silicone is cured, it's time to remove the whole thing from its container. Now a more flexible container is great because you can generally get the mould out without having to destroy it, or you can make your own boundary out of foam board and hot glue, which we cover in another video. So now that we have the silicone free, we need to get out our original model so we can start casting. Using a sharp knife, start cutting into the mould where you want it to come apart. And include some irregular cuts or waves to help the model fit back together how you want it to. Once you have the mould opened up enough, you can go ahead and take the model from inside, and any leftover parts of the model can then go ahead and be removed with pliers. Any sections that have holes you will need to cut through with your knife so that you're able to get the finished cast out. Next up comes the actual casting. Here we are mixing up some resin ready for casting. Remember that it's always important to check the mix ratio of your resin. Some will be 1 part A to 1 part B, while others might be 100 parts A to 1 part B. If you deviate too far from your required mix, then the resin might not set correctly, so it's always important to check. Now you want to prep your mould ready for casting. Here we just used rubber bands to keep the mould secure so we could pour in the resin. We also made sure to spray in some silicone mould release spray before casting to make the removal of the final piece a lot easier. It may take a few cups to fill your mould depending on the size of your model. One way to find out the exact amount of resin required is to fill the mould with water and then empty it into measuring cups. But if you've got multiple models that you're casting at the same time, you can just use the excess on one of your other moulds. Make sure that you rotate your mould around and shake it and tap it to try and get the resin into every single nook and cranny, as well as remove as many air bubbles as possible. You now need to give your resin time to fully cure. This should be written somewhere on your resin bottles or in any attached documentation. When it's done, you simply repeat the same process as before. You open up your mould and remove the finished piece. Now on to painting. All we've done to get ready for paint is to use some white gloss spray paint for our base layer, as the colour of the skull is going to come from a wash. The brown wash is essentially a very thin down paint with some additives in it to make it perfect for seeping down into all details of the model. Be liberal with it and cover every surface of your model, and then using a damp paper towel, wipe away any excess. This will leave you with the perfect effect of the wash only remaining in the recesses of the model. You can repeat this process multiple times if required to get the desired effect. Next up is the crown, and it couldn't be any easier. Here we're just going to cover the whole crown with a gold acrylic paint until it's covered. Making sure to check out every single angle in order not to leave any white bits. And that's it. You can go ahead now and paint some jewels on the crown if you want, or just leave it gold. You can even repeat the washing technique if you wanted, but that's all up to you. Thanks for watching how we brought Robert Baratheon's skull to life. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the rest of our videos showing how we made our Game of Thrones Vivarium. And please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos and projects like this in the future. Thanks for watching and see you on the next video.